I will introduce myself. I'm Jim Gustafson, professor of psychiatry at the University of Wisconsin Medical School with 14 days into a cold. So you needn't be concerned, I am recovering. I'm giving a series of 36 lectures, of which this is the sixth. Every week posted by mid-afternoon on YouTube. Today's lecture is called Mixed Up, about what helps and what harms. And the first section is, and here we go. In between the enmeshed people who we've been talking about, who always get harmed and dragged down by the family pathology or any pathology, and the resilient who go out the back door and free themselves from this, are a group of patients who are somewhere in between the two. They're mixed up. And they're mixed up about reading what helps them and what harms them. And then our job, with most of the patients really, is to position ourselves so to help them read more, use the knowledge that they actually have to read what's going to help them and what's going to harm them, which is the same as what to open up to and what to close to. So the first section here is called Taking Full Advantage of How the Neural Network is Constructed. I've argued in my two last books that we have a tremendous ally in the structure of the neural network as described by Edelman and Freeman and many others in neuroscience. Essentially, this structure alternates between incoherence on the in-breath, like that, which is where the rabbit perceives everything. It's not, if you're a rabbit, the in-breath is terrific. You open up to every possible color on the palette. And then the out-breath, which is a very low-dimensional space, in order to take some kind of action, like now we hop after that one, right? Or now we hop away from this one. So that's the first. Let's, Ed, go to the first diagram on the left. In two compartments. That's a picture of your minds. If you don't recognize your mind here, I'll explain to you how you might. The lower compartment is for in-breath. You see all the little pulses there. As open as possible to millions of sensory possibilities, a nearly 10-dimensional space by EEG measurement. Freeman calls this the pulse mode. That's your in-breath mode on the bottom. The other compartment, the upper one, is for the out-breath as closed as possible to concentrate its full thrust of action that has more like 1 or 2-dimensional or maybe 3-dimensional space. Freeman calls it the wave mode. You see how it has to take these millions of possibilities of pulses and translate it into a wave mode that integrates the whole brain, the whole action. Then the selection from the millions of possible pulses is made by what Poincaré called the sieve. Out of the millions of combinations on the in-breath, it chooses one. And the one that we're going to see chosen by a patient is we'll come back to, is that part in the purple there. See that black cat hanging onto a tree by one arm? That was the image of the patient that was selected as highly pertinent to her situation. So we'll come back to that, and Ed, you can come back with the camera here. Now, out of these millions of combinations, it chooses one. Now, what I would like to do before I get to that patient's ability to do that, I want to get to your ability to do this, which you may not realize that you have. I want to invoke in you some recall that you already know how to do this. All the time you're doing this. In fact, you do this on every in-breath and out-breath. You make the switch from millions of possibilities to one wave mode of action. Listen to, I want you to remember now how you know how to perceive millions of combinations in a glance. Listen to Stephen Booth describe what you can take in of a hardwood tree in summer. The greens in one leaf are nearly infinite. and are almost infinitely fewer than the greens of the tree as a whole. Under most conditions, light strikes the tree from a single angle, but only for a single second before that angle changes. And though the light may strike the tree from the same angle, the angle at which it strikes each leaf differs from the angle at which it strikes every other. Moreover, all the leaves in the observer are likely to be in some degree of motion. You really also do know how to move in relation to these infinite variations in your perceptual field. Your sieve will make the selection for you, as when you hit the brakes on your car to avoid something, right? Or you swerve sideways way, way, way faster than your conscious mind could possibly decide that. You decide it. Your unconscious decides it. Your instrument decides it. Otherwise, you would not have made it to this room. You wouldn't be sitting here now unless you'd been able to do that countless times. All right, now for the case of the Northwoods girl. We're halfway through the lecture. I seem to know. Lori's not here to tell me that I'm halfway through, but I'll make her come again sometime. Case of the Northwoods girl. Now I will take a single example to illustrate our potential for helping mixed-up patients. And this case will stand for all the patients, and for ourselves, for that matter. This is a case from my book in 2005 called Very Brief Psychotherapy. You can rush to the bookstore anytime you want on Amazon. And in there is the case of the Northwoods girl. That's what this is called. So you'll see where we were with this case at that time. This was a young woman in her late 20s from up north in Wisconsin who was beginning to tell me about her innocence, getting badly hurt by evil. This happened in so many places that it was difficult for her to know where to begin. She was putting her innocent chin on the line everywhere, and we agreed to see what her dream had to show us. It was a very brief dream. She was in a house with many other young women her age. The house was very fancy, with drapes, wing chairs, and the like in perfect order. She was trying to find an exit because she didn't belong, with all these fancy women. Then she glanced out the kitchen window and saw a black cat hanging by one arm from a clothesline pole, you might say from a tree of a certain kind, like that, which shrieked at her. I didn't say that, did I? So you can look at the drawing. There's the black cat that she sees out her back window. She gets basically a view of what her own unconscious has to say about dealing with all these fancy women sitting in those wing chairs up there, right? To make a long story short, now we're back here, Ed. The dream places her in the dream. The sieve here is taking a photograph of 1 second, right? In a setting with other mothers with their preschool children, where she has her children, right? Who are continually ignoring her and hurting her feelings. She's a newcomer. She's from up north. They're city girls. Every reason, Pam, you could think of that a country girl, from a small town would feel threatened, right? And they have their hierarchies too, as you know, right, Peggy? These women and the women's hierarchies are ruthless. These are the in ones, and then they don't even look at you if you're not one of right. So she's locked into synchrony with their degrading view of herself as much less than them. They can literally, in her eyes, she sees herself, which is that she counts. She's passed over in a second. It's like my being at Harvard College when I first went there, you know. God, it's like, oh, you're pretty invisible, right? When you come from a cornfield and go to Harvard College. Anyway, I better finish this lecture. But she has a beautiful ability to turn away from this imposing judgment of the group of fancy women looking down on a Northwoods girl from their superior position. In looking out the window of the fancy house into the backyard, she finds her unconscious mind, and as Siv makes an astonishing selection for her of a single image with a single sentence to say to her. What is quite astonishing on the DVD, which I'll loan you, which you want to see, is the force she is full of in imitating this shriek of the black cat, hanging by one arm, right? It is with great agility, athleticism, difficult to imagine in a naive young woman. Of course, this is what emerged as the necessary force to discontinue clinging to known evil. You know, how people do, they hold on to the group even though the group is doing them in. It was already in her. Once she found it was in her, we could find it again and again. And in more and more difficult situations in which she had been lost, including a sexual advance by her older brother a few weeks before he committed suicide, as if that wasn't difficult. Interestingly, speaking of evil, you know, getting a hold of innocence. Interestingly, and not by chance, I had a dream, and now we're just about to the very end of the lecture. It looks like that's a good thing. Well, I had a dream while I was preparing to compose this very lecture, and actually before, when I wrote it in the book in 2005, in which my sieve of my dream instrument made a selection of a comparable image in myself to indicate my positioning in relationship to this case. Now you can look at the second image there. You see that soccer player, and you see with his back to the goal, he's kicking over the top of his head and scoring a goal. You can come back here, Ed, because we're about to finish this lecture. It is of a soccer player kicking a ball over his own head into the goal. This is the kind of positioning we are capable of, and athleticism that is already in us for us to carry out our work. Thank you.